They thought she was just an old lady with a small house. But they had no idea she owned the land beneath their feet. It started on a quiet morning in late spring. The sky was golden, the valley peaceful, and my Grandma, Evelyn, was sitting on her porch drinking her favorite chamomile tea. She loved her mornings slow, a little breeze, a few birds singing, and her loyal golden retriever resting beside her. She had lived in that valley her whole life, and everyone who knew her said the same thing: Evelyn doesn't just live here, she belongs here. But things were about to change. A group of people, wearing sharp suits and fake smiles, drove up her long dirt driveway. The logo on their car read, Valley Creek HOA. They claimed they were the new homeowners association for the valley, and they said she owed them fees. Grandma chuckled when they told her. Fees? For my land? She asked, trying not to laugh. The man in charge, a tall one with slicked back hair, smiled stiffly. Yes, ma'am. You're part of this community now. HOA dues apply to everyone. She looked at him with calm eyes. Son, I've been here since before your office even existed. He didn't like that answer. His smile dropped. That was the first time I saw my grandma's hands tremble, not from fear, but from anger. She didn't raise her voice, but you could feel the power in her silence. Later that evening, she called me. I still remember her voice. Sweetheart, they're trying to take my home. At first, I didn't believe her. What do you mean, Grandma? They said if I don't pay their dues, they'll start legal action. They said they can evict me. Her voice broke slightly, and that shattered me. My grandma, the strongest woman I knew, the one who raised me, the one who taught me how to fight for what's right, sounded tired. I drove to her house that same night. When I arrived, her porch light was still on, but she was sitting in the dark. The papers from the HOA were spread across her table, full of threats, legal jargon, and fake authority. I could see the anger boiling in her eyes. They think they can scare me, she whispered, but they don't know who they're dealing with. Grandma wasn't rich. She wasn't powerful. But she had something they didn't: truth. Over the next few days, the HOA started sending letters every week. Each one was colder, more threatening than the last. They accused her of violating community rules. They said her fence was too tall. Her mailbox didn't match neighborhood standards. They even said her dog was too loud. Every letter ended the same way. Failure to comply may result in eviction. The nerve. The arrogance. I tried reasoning with them. I went to their office, a shiny glass building that looked completely out of place in our quiet valley. The receptionist smiled until she saw Grandma's name on the file. Then her face turned cold. I'm sorry, she said, but the board has decided. If she doesn't pay, she'll be removed. Removed? I repeated. You mean evicted? She nodded. That's correct. I left that office furious. When I got back home, Grandma was out back tending her garden like nothing had happened. She always said gardening made her feel grounded. It reminds me that no one truly owns the earth, she'd say. That night, as the crickets sang and the stars glowed above the valley, I asked her, Why don't you just show them your deed, Grandma? End this nonsense. She smiled faintly. Oh, I will. But first, I want to see how far they'll go. I didn't understand what she meant. But I trusted her. A week later, the HOA sent a final notice: immediate payment required. They demanded thousands of dollars in unpaid dues and fines. And if she didn't pay within 7 days, they would take her to court. Grandma didn't even flinch. She calmly folded the letter and placed it in her drawer. Then she picked up her phone and called an old friend, a retired county lawyer named Bill. He'd been her neighbor for 30 years. Bill, she said, I think it's time to dig up the old records. He laughed. You mean those records? Yes, she said softly. Those ones. The next morning, we met at the county records office. The smell of old paper filled the air as Bill pulled out a thick, worn folder. The clerk at the desk looked confused. Ma'am, that file hasn't been opened in decades. Exactly, Grandma said. When she opened it, I saw yellowed pages, faded ink, and signatures from people who'd lived long before me. Bill pointed to a line near the bottom. See this, he said. This land, the entire valley, was deeded to Evelyn's grandfather in 1898. It was never subdivided. I blinked. Wait. You mean Grandma doesn't just own her house? Bill smiled. No, kid. She owns everything these HOA folks built on. For a moment, I was speechless. My grandma, the sweet old woman who baked cookies for the neighborhood kids, was technically the landlord of the entire valley. But she never used that power. She'd let people build, live, and grow freely. Because she believed in community, not control. That's what made what they were doing so disgusting. Bill made copies of the deeds, the old maps, and every legal description he could find. They can't evict you from your own land, he told her. Let them try, the judge will laugh them out of the courtroom. But Grandma wasn't done yet. She said, no. They need to learn. They need to understand what happens when greed blinds you. Over the next few days, she stayed calm. She even waved at the HOA reps when they drove by. They thought she'd given up. But inside, she was building something, a quiet storm. When the hearing day came, the HOA showed up confident and smug. They had lawyers, folders, and even a reporter from the local paper. They believed it would be an easy win. Grandma arrived in her old blue truck. She wore her favorite floral dress and a pearl necklace that belonged to her mother. She looked like someone who was going to church, not to court. When the judge entered, the HOA lawyer started his speech immediately. He accused Grandma of being uncooperative, in violation, and unfit for residency. He ended with, "We ask the court to allow the HOA to proceed with eviction." Then the judge turned to Grandma. "Ma'am, do you have anything to say?" She stood slowly, her voice steady. "Your Honor, I don't owe them a single cent. And I have proof." Bill handed her the file. She placed the documents on the judge's desk. The courtroom went silent as the judge flipped through the pages. After a few moments, he raised an eyebrow. This deed says you own the entire valley." The HOA lawyer laughed nervously. "That must be a mistake." Grandma looked at him and said, "The only mistake here is thinking you could bully me off land my family has owned for over a century." The judge smiled faintly. Case dismissed. The HOA members froze. Their faces turned pale. The reporter scribbled notes furiously. When Grandma walked out of that courtroom, people clapped. Even strangers who had been watching stood up to applaud her. Outside, the HOA president tried to approach her. "Mrs. Evelyn, perhaps we can." She stopped him cold. "You came to take my home. Now, you'll pay rent for standing on my soil." He went speechless. I'll never forget that moment, the look in her eyes, the power in her calm. She didn't yell. She didn't gloat. She simply stood there, proud and unshaken, as the truth finally crushed their lies. That day, Grandma didn't just win a case. She won back her peace, her dignity, and her valley. For a few peaceful weeks, the valley felt alive again. Grandma was smiling more. The neighbors stopped by to congratulate her. Some even brought flowers and homemade pies, saying how proud they were of her courage. But peace never lasts long when pride gets hurt. The HOA might have lost the case, but they weren't done. They couldn't stand the idea that a little old woman had humiliated them in court. So, they decided to fight dirty. It started small. Someone slashed her mailbox late at night. Then her trash bins went missing. She just smiled, her hands muddy. "Oh, sweetheart, they're trying to break me. But I've survived worse." Her calmness scared me sometimes. She had this quiet strength, like she carried generations of resilience in her heart. Still, I couldn't watch her fight alone. So, I started recording everything: the damaged property, the missing letters, the strange men driving slowly by her house. I knew we might need proof someday. One afternoon, I found her sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon. She looked tired. I sat beside her, and for a while, we said nothing. The sun was setting over the hills, painting the sky orange and gold. Finally, she spoke. "You know, your grandfather built that barn over there with his bare hands. Every nail, every board. He used to say, 'Land is like time. Once you give it away, you never get it back.'" Her voice cracked a little, and I saw tears in her eyes. I just wish he could see this mess." I put my hand over hers. "He'd be proud of you, Grandma. You stood up for everything he believed in." She smiled faintly. "Maybe. But I'm not done yet." The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. She said she had an idea, something that would make sure no one ever tried to take that valley again. She called Bill, the lawyer, and asked him to meet at the courthouse. I tagged along, still confused but curious. When we got there, she handed him a stack of papers. "I want to file something," she said. Bill adjusted his glasses. "What's this?" "It's time to make it official," she said. "If they want to play games, we'll change the rules." He scanned the papers and smiled. "You're brilliant." She had drafted a legal claim to formally register the entire valley under her family's historical ownership, not just her house, but every inch of land the HOA had claimed authority over. It meant every street, every lot, every so-called community area technically belonged to her. And it was completely legal. A few weeks later, the registration went through. The county confirmed it publicly. From that day on, the HOA couldn't enforce a single rule without her permission. The same people who had tried to evict her now had to send her requests just to hold meetings. The power shift was unbelievable. At first, the HOA members pretended to ignore it. But when the news spread, homeowners started asking questions. "Wait, you mean we've been paying them for years when the land wasn't even theirs?" The community turned against the HOA almost overnight. People stopped paying dues. Some demanded refunds. Others started organizing under Grandma's guidance to form a new association, one that actually cared about the residents, not the money. The HOA president tried one last desperate move. He filed an appeal, accusing Grandma of fraud. But that backfired spectacularly. The court not only dismissed the appeal, they fined him personally for wasting the court's time. After that, he disappeared from the valley altogether. I'll never forget the day Grandma stood in front of the town hall to speak. It was a cool evening, and hundreds of people showed up. She stood on the steps, her silver hair shining in the sunset. She didn't speak with anger. She spoke with heart. "I never wanted power," she said. "I only wanted peace. But peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from standing up when something isn't right, even if your voice shakes." People clapped, some cried. Neighbors who once ignored her now looked at her with respect. After the speech, a young woman approached her. "Mrs. Evelyn, I wish my grandmother was like you. You give us hope." Grandma smiled softly. "Honey, I'm just an old woman who got tired of being pushed around. You all have that same strength inside you, you just need to remember it." That night, as we drove back home, she looked out the window and said something I'll never forget. "You know, they built their homes thinking they owned the world. But the truth is, none of us really own anything. We're just caretakers for a while, until it's someone else's turn." I didn't say anything. I just listened. Because that's what you do when wisdom speaks. Weeks passed, and the valley finally found peace again. The new community board was forming, and Grandma was honored as the valley's founder. They even named a park after her, Evelyn Creek Park. She didn't want fame or recognition. All she cared about was that no one would ever go through what she did. But fate had one final twist. One afternoon, I came by with some groceries. She was sitting on the porch, her eyes half closed, smiling at the sunlight dancing through the trees. "Hey, Grandma," I said. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "Just tired, sweetheart. But it's a good kind of tired." That evening, she passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the same house she was born in, on the same land she fought to protect. The entire valley showed up at her funeral. Farmers, shopkeepers, kids, even the mailman, everyone came. They filled the church, and some stood outside because there wasn't enough space. Bill gave a short speech. "Evelyn didn't just save her home," he said. "She reminded us what it means to belong to something real, something worth fighting for." When we buried her under the big oak tree by her garden, the sunset looked like the sky was on fire. And for a moment, I swear, the wind whispered through the valley, as if she was still there, watching over it. After the service, I went back to her porch. Her chair was empty, her teacup still sitting there. But I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt peace, the kind she always carried. A week later, I got a letter in the mail addressed to me. It was from Grandma's lawyer. Inside, there was a note written in her shaky handwriting. "Sweetheart, the land is yours now. Protect it. Not with anger, but with kindness. Remember, the valley doesn't belong to us. We belong to it." I cried like a child reading those words. But I also smiled. Because she'd already done what she came to do, she taught us all to stand our ground, to speak up, and to never let greed silence goodness. Now, years later, when I sit on that same porch, I still feel her presence. Every morning, the wind carries her laughter through the trees, and the sunlight feels like her touch. Sometimes, I see kids playing in the park named after her, and I think this is her legacy. Not the land, not the victory, but the love she left behind. And whenever people ask me about her story, I tell them the truth. They tried to evict my grandma. But what they didn't know is that she owned the valley, and their hearts too. So if you're listening to this right now, and someone's trying to take away what's yours, your peace, your dignity, your home, remember Evelyn. Stand tall. Speak softly. But never back down. Because sometimes, the quietest voice in the room is the one that shakes the world. If you believe in standing up for what's right, share this story. Let the world know that strength isn't about age or power. It's about heart.